Thanks everyone for attending. This is PDW number 10. It is a segment in our entire series of proposal development workshops. And you can see the title right there. But so we're very excited to have Dr. Barnard come and speak to us about evaluation plans. And then do note that we have several more coming up, and I'll put the link to those events in the chat. If you have questions afterwards, you can put them, or during, you can put the questions in the chat and I'll monitor that. But you can also raise your hand at the end and we can monitor discussion then. But it will be fun and enjoyable to listen to our topic today. Every proposal should have an evaluation plan, even if it's not included officially. That's my pitch. Okay, take it away, Wendy.
Okay. Are you recording? It doesn't look like you are.
It is.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Barnard. I'm the director of CREST. And I have my colleague Megan joining as well. And I would have added her name to this if I knew she was going to attend. But some of you have worked with her and know that she is absolutely amazing to work with as well. So just as a quick, let's see if I can. Whoops, let me get my mouse in the right place. Okay, so the overview of today is I will give a little introduction about CREST. I'll talk about research versus evaluation, understanding evaluation and solicitations, tips on writing evaluation plans and logic models. I could do 3 hours on that, but I will not. Some examples, and then I'll finish up with considerations when working with an evaluator, or if you're planning to do the evaluation in-house. Okay, who we are. CREST, College Research and Evaluation Services team, consists of me, Wendy Barnard, I'm the director, Megan O'Donnell, and then also Karen Gordon. We are in the process of hiring some additional staff, and we have some student workers. Primarily, we work internally at ASU with faculty. However, we have been spreading our wings, and we have more opportunities to work with faculty across the United States with different grants. Overall, we provide evaluation services and also technical assistance for both grant monitoring and evaluation. And I'll use some words interchangeably, but hopefully it will make sense as I go along. I know that USAID really talks about monitoring and evaluation. When I'm talking about National Science Foundation grants, sort of move over to formative, which is a monitoring piece, versus outcome evaluation. One of the things that we try to help with right from the beginning is to help frame evaluation questions that align with the program goals activities. There's multiple ways to do this, and I'll show some examples right away. But it's really important as you're working on a solicitation to make sure that the activities that you're proposing are really aligned with the outcomes. And I'll give some examples as we move forward. Another thing that we help with is determining the appropriate methodologies. Obviously, people know about surveys, but there's a lot of other methodologies that can enhance the evaluation efforts in terms of data collection. Develop and implement those data collection tools, whether they're quantitative surveys, observations, or whether it's more of a qualitative approach. And then moving right along, analyzing those data for you, preparing reports, briefs, and presentations. And that often is especially if you have grant funding through an agency, they will require annual reports. Some foundations would much prefer a presentation, so it will differ depending on what you have. As an external evaluator, oftentimes, and it used to really be highlighted in solicitations where you had to have what was considered an external evaluator. Lately, I've been noting solicitations will talk about having an independent evaluator. And that simply means that you don't want to have your grad student analyzing your results. You want someone that doesn't necessarily report up to your department home or to your supervisor. You really want to be able to show the agency that you're putting the plan together for, that whoever is collecting these data, whoever is presenting them and giving you recommendations, is someone that is independent. CREST meets that because we are now under Knowledge Enterprise. UOEEE is another evaluation team on campus, and they fall under the Provost office. So both of our groups are considered external evaluators. One of the things that they've often started to do as well is, if you are internal to the grant, so if you use someone that's internal at ASU, you could hire someone, or you could have someone serve as an auditor to oversee the results, to make sure that there's no bias in them. And all of that is to say is that you want to make sure that your budget and the money that you have is spent toward the research that you're doing, the implementation, whatever that looks like, understanding that you do need to give some to evaluation, but you don't want your entire budget to be blown on that. So there's ways to be creative in finding people to help with the evaluation. One of the things that the external evaluator will do, whether it's us, whether it's UOEEE, whether it's an external organization, is oftentimes they'll write the evaluation section free of charge, with the understanding that if your grant is funded, that you will choose them to be the evaluator. And the evaluator is expected to collaborate with faculty members, with the grant team, help with all reporting, attend site visits, depending on the funding source, and adjunct tasks as needed, ad hoc tasks as needed. Oftentimes you put an evaluation plan together and you might think to yourself, oh, I should have done this, this, or this. You should have a relationship with your evaluator that allows you to be flexible in the data that you're collecting, understanding that you still have to stay within the budget. So if you're adding something in, you might want to take something out. But it's important to have a good relationship with the evaluation team so that you can be agile as needed. Who needs evaluation services? Well, for sponsored projects, oftentimes it's a requirement. It is not always a requirement, but if it is a requirement, I highly recommend that you reach out to someone considered an external evaluator to help with the process, depending on the level of points, the level of merit that you'll get for the evaluation section. Implementation projects. So this is one that oftentimes you'll get a pot of money to pilot something or to try an outreach. And oftentimes you'll think, oh, I don't need an evaluator. But I would recommend that, especially for some of those small grants, getting an evaluator to look at the implementation really helps you as you want to scale up, because you're able then to write into your next request for funding that I worked with an evaluator, these are the data that we received, and this is how we'll change our project moving forward. This is how we'll enhance it. And that is recognized very highly among organizations. And sometimes you just want some unbiased participant feedback, whether it's a workshop and you just want to see what satisfaction they had, what they'll use from the workshop, whether it's a check-in to make sure things that are going okay and your participants might not want to tell you the truth, or whether it's a needs assessment. And that's something that can happen at the beginning of a grant, where an evaluator can come in and ask the participants what they're expecting, what is it that they have a need for, what is it that they're hoping to gain from this project. And this is really important if you're working with outside partners, whether it's industry or institutions. And all of those things really benefit from an evaluator, because they're collecting the data confidentially and it's unbiased. And of course, anytime that you're examining outcomes, which would be knowledge, skills, behavior. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. One of the really important things is understanding the difference between evaluation versus research. They really are very distinct ways in which you're collecting data, analyzing data, reporting on data. Research is a critical part of any funded study. How are you able to take the knowledge that you're gaining from the work that you're doing, generalize to a population, and have a broader impact? And that's really the research piece of it. The evaluation is helping you improve what you're doing, what works with whom. The research, a question is, how does something work? The evaluators will come in and look at how well does it work. Research draws conclusions. Evaluation helps you determine decisions. And I always say, as part of my spiel on my soapbox, is that good evaluations ask questions that when they get the answers, you have actionable information. So every piece of data that's collected through the evaluation should lead to a change that you could make in your program. Now, there's always some ways around that, some outliers to that, especially when a project is looking at specific information. But the evaluator's job really is to help you make the best program that you can, and looking at the efficacy of that program beyond just the research piece. And then this is just a picture to illustrate that, really thinking about the evaluation versus research. And I'm not going to belabor that point. So here's an example solicitation. I'm sure everyone on this call has seen a solicitation. I think I can't remember what I took this from, but it was definitely something that I presented on for Research Academy. And this is National Science Foundation. They've tweaked these words a little bit, but for the most part, they're very similar. And it's really asking for meaningful, which I think is important, assessment and evaluation using appropriate metrics. Thinking about the effectiveness of the activities and how they can be done at a higher, more aggregated level than the individual project. So yes, you're looking at this project as a whole, but the way you're looking at it is by collecting multiple pieces of data to help tell the story about what's working and what can be improved. So even when you have an evaluator, as you look at the next quote that I have, the principal investigators are still expected to be accountable. The evaluator can help with that, right? They can say that, yes, we attended these meetings. Yes, we did document review of the publications. And however that might look, which will vary among projects, does give some accountability to the work that is being done. And as a PI and as a grant team, most of you know that you do a lot more often than you promised. So how do you make sure that you're telling the funding agency all of the great things that happened? And the evaluator can help with that. So I'm going to start going through some examples. This is broader impacts, and broader impacts is a piece that obviously has become really risen to the top of what National Science Foundation in particular is looking for, along with NIH and other agencies. And it really thinks about how is what you're doing benefiting society. And this is accountability to the taxpayers who are providing these funds for your grant, but it also is accountability to the agency and the people that you're working with. So, you know, as you're thinking about those broader impacts, the evaluation can help tease that out for you. Some pieces will be very specific to the work that you might be doing as a PI. You know, are you recruiting a diverse group of candidates into your program? Are you working with industry, you know, in your field? But thinking about this, we're going to go through some examples. So, again, the impact of society through research. So a lot of times you're able to do that if you are, you know, working on research that you know is moving the field ahead. So it's whether you're able to secure a patent or whether you have, you know, published some, you know, seminal articles in great journals. Those are all pieces of the research that are important. The evaluation can help tie that back to the grant and say, yes, these are the publications that were created. These are the things that was done because faculty members were funded through this grant. And we can help show sort of that impact through the research. Inclusion of underrepresented groups. And this is really important in a lot of grants. And that is, are you including people that are underrepresented, whether it's women, whether it's people with different needs, neurodiversity, physical needs, whether it's underrepresented minorities, whatever that might look like. The evaluation can help you figure out a plan to track some of those metrics, from all the way from marketing to recruitment to applications to enrollment. And making sure that you have done your due diligence to create an environment that reflects society. However, if you don't the first year of a grant, you at least have these data points to say, these are all of the things that we tried. And yes, we realize that we didn't hit our metric of greater than 50% being female. However, we reached out to all of these groups and tried our best. And that's a lot of times what the funding agency wants to see, that you tried. You don't have to succeed every single time, but you have to show that you've tried, you've made that effort. And then workforce development. Obviously, that is another thing that's become really important. How does a program develop a competitive STEM workforce? A lot of grants now are being very specific in what they're looking for: communication, collaboration, ethics, critical thinking, problem solving. And I will say, I'm going to talk about it later, but I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's really important. Communication, collaboration, ethics, critical thinking, problem solving, 21st century skills. We know that they're important. They don't just happen organically. They can in some circumstances, but always think about, if those are your outcome metrics, how do you create activities for the people that are participating that will lead to that? So just as when you teach, you sort of, get your goals, and then you sort of backwards design to figure out the activities that you need. Communication skills aren't just going to get better unless you provide opportunities for students, let's say for graduate students, to participate in presenting to a kindergarten class, or being active in ASU's Open Door, or working, in a high school class, or mentoring a student, but making sure that you provide activities that help lead to those workforce development skills is something that's critical that you do as a PI and or a grant team, and the evaluator can help figure out ways to measure the impact of those activities. Another piece is collaborations and partnerships. This often, you'll see this in very large grants: Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and then some, obviously, your typical NSF grants. It really is thinking about how you're engaging with those outside of ASU. And it's not just inviting them to a meeting, but thinking about ways to authentically involve them in the research that you're doing. And again, there are ways to help you measure that. And there's ways to think about it as you're thinking about the evaluation. You don't just want to invite people to a meeting and then say, oh, thank you for coming, and mark them down on a sheet. But how do you continue to engage them? And that's where the evaluation comes in, right? The evaluators can say, hey, we're going to collect data, and we're gonna detail out all of the ways that this partner thinks that they can be included. Okay, it's 3 months later. We're gonna send a survey to this partner and see the level in which they thought they were engaged. And it's just a way to create an internal feedback loop for you as the PI to know, hey, I really thought that, it was working with X, Y, and Z, but there seems to be some challenges. Now is the time for a meeting with them to think about how we can make things right so that they are included. So again, not only do you want to put that into your proposal, but you also want to be really clear with the evaluation team about what you're looking for and how they can collect data to help move the process forward. And then outreach activities. These are the really fun ones. And these are the ones that you have to get really creative in evaluating. Yes, you absolutely, for a smaller grant, can say, in your annual report, I went to I went to high school career day and I was able to, talk about my research, and I allowed students to work with my equipment, let's say my virtual reality equipment. But if you have a larger grant, your outreach activities are a way to really wow the sponsors of the project, to show that you're collecting data creatively, to make that fun, and to think about ways in which you can improve what you're doing. All right, so these are some of the things, and if Megan's still on it, Megan and I have engaged with. These are both at Open Door. These are things that you could do. You don't need an evaluator to do this. Get some emoji stickers from Amazon. You can get packets of 1,000. I think I bought them all up, but hopefully they have restocked. And you can simply capture whether people thought it was fun, whether they learned something. We use all different types of sayings on this poster board. And then you just let kids take stickers, put them on there. You do want to be a little strategic with it. Decide what age group you might want to work with. Do you just want students? Will you let anyone take a sticker? If you give a sticker to a 3-year-old, they're going to pick their favorite color. So let them keep a sticker and then put a sticker that how they have their parent help them put a sticker on how they really feel. But you can really make it fun and just show some outcome to the activity that you did. One time we did this was a little harder, and I'm moving to the left side of the screen. And you can see I put kindly reserve this for preschool through high school students. And it was marbles, and kids got to pick. Before they went into the activity, tell us if you think X, Y, and Z. And then at the end, tell us what you found. And you can use that as a pre-post test, just like that. And that's another one, though, you would need someone there to help facilitate that. The kids had tons of fun grabbing the marbles, putting it in, and we were able to creatively capture data, pre-post data on this activity. No, you cannot do it every time. Do it, call it a signature event, whatever it might look like. But that is certainly something that you could do with an outreach event. Okay. Tips for a well-written evaluation plan. The program solicitation will always have this idea of a formative evaluation, impact evaluation, summative evaluation. Those terms are sometimes intermingled. So don't, if you don't see these exact words, sometimes the impact evaluation and summative evaluation are combined. That's okay. The evaluator that you work with will know that these 3 pieces. The formative is thinking about, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Getting feedback from both the grant team and the people participating, addressing challenges as they occur, and satisfaction. So it's really, again, those actionable pieces of data that you're collecting that help you improve your program, take something out of your program, figure out if you're doing too much, too little. And this is important, not just for the participants that are engaging in the program, but it's also an important thing to do with a grant team. If you have a program where you don't get a lot of money, your indirects are sucked up and thrown somewhere else, and you have promised a lot of data collection, you have promised a lot of activities, well, you certainly don't want your grant team to get burned out. So it's making sure the evaluator can talk to the grant team or being honest about it. And then the evaluation team can say, okay, we'll do a quick check-in with your grad students. And the grad students say, oh my gosh, I cannot go to another Saturday all-day session. We've done it for 6 months in a row. And then you figure out ways to make sure that your grad students aren't leaving. You also make sure you figure out ways to collect data from the people who are participating, who also might not want to be there every Saturday for 8 hours. And you make the program better and better and better. So anything from a satisfaction survey to literally the evaluation team picking up a syllabus and saying, oh yes, they did create this class. Those are all pieces of the formative evaluation. The impact evaluation are your outcomes, like what happened as a result of what you've done. And this isn't just, okay, we had 10 people come to our session. That's the formative evaluation. That's attendance. Impact evaluation is we had 10 people come to the workshop. What did they learn? Did their interest increase? Are they able to use this information in their professional work? Right? So it's really thinking about all of those different pieces, being realistic, which I'm jumping down a slide, being realistic in the time commitment. So someone who comes to a 1-hour professional development workshop is going to gain some knowledge. They'll gain some interest potentially in the topic, but are you going to change the trajectory of their life? Probably not. Same as a high school student. You might show them how cool engineering is. Are they going to immediately apply to MIT to be an engineer or to ASU? We don't know. So keeping in mind that the level of your intervention needs to match what you're actually looking at for your impact. And then lastly, the summative evaluation is when you sort of wrap things up at the end of the program. These are the overall findings. This is lessons learned. A lot of times people will come back and say, oh, if I was going to do this again, I would have hired a project manager to help oversee it. Or if I was going to do this again, I would have had 10 students each semester instead of the way, I broke it down, or whatever it might be. And then lastly, a sustainability plan. And evaluators will have metrics to collect some of that information. How, have you thought about what you're doing after the grant funds end? And then we'll go into a logic model in just a minute, so you'll see this visually, but the importance, again, of aligning activities with the evaluation plan and having outcomes for each participant group. I'm going to always use collaboration as my example because it's a really good one. Collaboration is such an important skill to have, especially if you have a program that is trying to increase interdisciplinarity in the field. But you have to set up activities that will lead to collaboration. Sometimes it will happen organically. I know I said it never did, but sometimes it will. But how do you create a research project where you're pulling different people in so that you will see an increase in collaboration? And how many times might that take? It might not be after one session of graduate students working together, but it might take an entire semester working on a project that you'll see a change in collaboration. So always make sure that an outcome that you propose always has an activity that will help that outcome be achieved. And then this used to be a really, really, really hot topic. I don't see it that much anymore, but I think it's really good to keep the idea in your mind. And that is this idea of SMART objectives. So you have your evaluation questions. They'll say, we'd like to see a performance measure, timeline, data collection plan. And you want to make sure that it's written in a SMART way, which is it needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed. So each semester, we will collect surveys from the high school students that show greater than 80% interest in pursuing an engineering degree. Okay, so something like that. And that is a way you're shoving all of that important information into one sentence, and you're really getting at how you're going to measure it and what that looks like within the time frame. And I've gotten dinged, gotten dinged on evaluation plans when I haven't really clearly said this will be collected each semester or this will be collected annually. Like I'll put it in the narrative, but I don't put it in my table. So I've learned my lesson. Like I'll put it in 3 places if I have to, because people are reading 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 proposals. You want your evaluation plan to stand out and to show that you've thought all of those pieces through. Okay, continuous feedback loop. This goes to the formative piece. Again, the funding agency really wants to know that you have a plan to continually make your project better and better and better. So the feedback loop, a lot of people have seen it, action research type things. But then I also put in a picture sort of thinking about the formative and the summative piece, right? So the formative piece is you're doing something, you're measuring it, you're analyzing it, you're fixing it. That's your formative piece. You're constantly collecting data, not overburdening participants, but collecting data. And it can be as simple as, wow, these students are not engaged today. We're going to have to change up what we're doing, to collecting a survey, an exit ticket after every session. And that will vary. But then thinking about how the formative, if you don't have the project going well, you certainly are not going to be able to measure the summative, and you can measure it, but you're not going to get the results that you want in the summative section. If people lost interest after the second session and they're checked out, they're going to tell you they didn't gain anything when you do the survey to ask them about their skills. So really keeping in mind that formative piece. And also, I think what is so important is you show people that you're collecting data and you're using it. And I always recommend, if you're collecting a satisfaction survey and you're seeing a group each time, put that satisfaction data up on a PowerPoint or a screen and say, hey, the last couple sessions, this is what you all said. So happy you're satisfied. But there are a couple people who wish that we would focus on these things more. Let's figure out a way to do that. And so that you show the participants that their information that they've provided is valuable. So when you try to collect data at the end of your project, they're going to fill out that survey, because you don't want a 10% response rate. You want to get as high of a response rate as you possibly can. Okay, so here are some more tips. And I'll share this with Faye, and she can distribute this. A well-written evaluation plan. I highly recommend either a logic model or an evaluation chart, something that illustrates what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to know it's being implemented, and how you know that it's successful. And I'll show you a couple examples. You really want to use, if possible, unless it's a very small grant, mixed methods to gather and analyze data. It's really easy. Even if you have a survey, you can always stick an extra question on the bottom. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Can you tell us something that you learned? Some type of open-ended question, but it really does give some depth to the evaluation and the data that you've collected. Moving beyond self-reported measures. Now, I understand you cannot do this for smaller grants, for smaller evaluation budgets, but if you have the ability, if you have asked, let's say, graduate students in a program, their skills, for them to self-assess their skills in a lab, you can certainly work with the mentors and say, these are the things that students have talked to us about. Tell us what you've observed. What are the skills that you've seen happen in the lab? And if those things, if those data pieces come together, then you have a really nice story to tell, that it wasn't just self-reported data. And I will say, even an evaluation plan and a proposal, if you only have self-reported data, you will get dinged on that. You want to have something that says, oh, and I also observed them present their research and they were able to do these things. Try as hard as you can to have something that confirms any self-reported data that you collect. Dissemination efforts. How will the information be disseminated? Everything that the evaluator collects does not always go to the funding agency. You might collect some satisfaction on an internal program, and you give that back to the leadership team, and the leadership team uses that information to create an additional workshop, let's say, for example. But you do want to say something like that in the report. We collected data at these time points that we provided to the leadership team to make decisions on how they were going to work with blank, whatever that might be. And then finally, at the end of your grant, maybe if it's 12 months, I think you can probably bypass this a little bit, but even 12 months, usually that is a pilot grant. So you want to say, and now I'm going to learn all of these great things and I'm going to scale this up. But you do really want to make sure that you have something in the evaluation plan that shows sustainability, that you're planning for sustainability. Like, You've created a course. Now you're going to try to get this on the course catalog. You have created a workshop. You're going to continue to use this workshop in, whatever it is that you're going to do. Or that you'll continue to meet with the leadership team to strategize about how you will continue some of these efforts. But you have to have something in there about sustaining the program after grant funding, even if it's a sentence. But you want to make sure that the reviewers and the agency know that you have plans to keep it going. That's not just a one-shot thing. They want you to use these funds to create something that will continue. Okay, I know I'm getting at the end of time, so I'm going to go through these a little bit fast. The logic model. People get really scared about a logic model, and it can be scary if you have a lot of data that you are including in it. But it really is a visual representation about how your program works. It's a map, sort of how your journey proceeds, right? What direction you're going, how you're progressing, if you've reached your goals. This is something that you might need to scratch out on paper and have someone that can create really great graphics help with. Some logic models have everything, very detailed logic models. USAID, oh my gosh, those logic models are 3, 4, 5 pages. But if you are putting something into an NSF budget, it really is just showing that that there's these pieces that you're doing, the activities that you're doing that will lead to certain outcomes. All right, this is a logic model. Honestly, you can Google, find me a good logic model example. Help me with a logic model. There's a lot of resources out there. If it's something that gets overwhelming, you can talk to the evaluator if there's enough time, and they can help walk you through some of this. Oftentimes, people get the grant, and then you can go back, excuse me, and you can help develop this logic model. You can help streamline it. You can help add information to it. Okay, so quick example, increase college completion rates. And you can see that you have sort of your objective, what you want to happen, but then you have your real measurable specific thing. Within the program, 100% of students will have a positive attitude toward attending college or going to college. So again, just an example, but it is a way to help you as the grant team, as the person putting this together. It's a way to help the reviewers see this, and it's a way for the evaluator to help keep you on track. This is another example that I've done, and sometimes you just have room for a couple paragraphs. So there's a couple paragraphs that can go into the evaluation portion of the solicitation. Not as fun. And then you'll see a table next to it. And depending on the grant, sometimes the language changes. I just did a proposal for USDA, and they asked very specific questions. So I had to change sort of that top line to match what they were asking, and what they called something that I would call one thing, they called a product, and the timeline needed to be set up a little different. But overall, they want to make sure that you have something in place that you can check off. These are the things that we want to do. This is how we're going to measure it. This is how often we will do it. And this is the data that we're hoping to get. Okay, some other tips, and we are wrapping up now, so we'll have time for questions. Some other tips that I think are really important are making sure that the evaluation budget reflects the effort of the evaluation. And I had a proposal that I worked on that was really great, and they were dinged on this because they didn't tell me how much they were giving, which was my fault. I didn't ask. So we had this really comprehensive evaluation, and then they put a very small amount of money toward it. And one of the reviewers said, this evaluation cannot be completed with this much money. And it's sort of like spiraled from there, right? The data management plan, all of these different pieces that were attached to this evaluation, attached to data being collected, that because the budget wasn't appropriate, there just wasn't, in their mind, wasn't a way to really move forward with this. a lot of times these agencies will come back and ask for a detailed evaluation budget or ask you to fix things. So I'm just always honest when I'm working with a PI. How much money do you think you have? What are the pieces that you really need to collect? Crest, we're internal at ASU, we're a nonprofit, we don't make money. So we do need to get paid for our services, but we try to figure out a way to work so that we're making the money to do it, and the grant still has money to do what they have promised to do. Always have a collaborative relationship between the grant team and the evaluator. Again, just even if it's just checking in once a month, just to sort of let everybody know where you are. Evaluator is not supposed to come in once a year, collect some data, type it up, and leave. Your evaluator is really supposed to work with you to help your program be as great as it can be, and for you to use data that's collected to help it make it as great as it can be. And then the evaluation should not overburden participants. Just as we get annoyed filling out an extra survey or an extra this or that, think about ways to streamline the process of collecting data. You might not need a pre and a post test for a 2-week program. You might be able to do a retrospective pre-post test where you ask participants to think about what they've gained over that time. You might be able to document things on an activity that they're doing as part of class, whatever that is, but certainly respect the participants. And make sure that the evaluator and the research team isn't duplicating efforts, that they're not using the same science identity survey. If you're going to give it, just give it one time and share these data. I did have a slide for IRB and I took it out, which I'm glad I did. Because we're running out of time, but the evaluator can help get your IRB. The evaluator will help walk you through that process. And to me and other people, that is well worth hiring an evaluator, because you will need institutional review, board approval before you start collecting data, and oftentimes before they even allow the funding to hit your account. Okay, I'm just going to say this real quick. When you work with an evaluator, make sure you share the solicitation, your anticipated budget, how much space you have. If you only have half a page, it's way better to tell me than to have me write 2 pages and then find out you only used half a page. I'd much prefer just try to smush my information into half a page, and be clear about the timeline. And that's it. That's my information. Please contact us, UOEEE, anyone else for evaluation services. It really is an important part of the proposal. And like I said in the beginning, agencies are using the evaluation section really to tease out the good from the excellent proposals, the highly competitive from the competitive proposals. So it's definitely worth having a great evaluation section. And I will end it there, and I will let Faye take over. I'll open the chat and see questions.
There was just one.
Okay.
From Monroe, who said, "What's the difference between you and UOEEE?" And I said there really wasn't, just experience-wise.
Yeah, we offer the same services. UOEEE started out as the internal evaluation group that teacher evaluations, course evaluations, and they spread their wings to include sponsored projects and evaluations. And we always started out that way, but we work with them on different projects. They're great. There's enough evaluation work to go around. Oftentimes, if they don't have capacity, they'll send it to us. If we don't have capacity, we'll send it to them.
And then there's also a link to, you've used some of the material here. There's there's an evaluation association where you can request evaluators. And I've heard mixed things about that, but it is another resource that's out there for you.
Yes.
And then the next question was, what is the role of monitoring and evaluation? Does it refer to internal evaluation, kind of self-evaluation, or our own evaluation?
That's a good question.
It is.
It depends on the funding agency. So USAID, their monitoring piece is very specific on these are the stakeholders, these are the projects, this is everything that's happening, and this is how we'll measure it. A lot of times, especially for smaller grants, let's say NSF, the monitoring piece becomes an internal piece. Where we know that they, for let's say REU, research experience for undergraduates, summer experience, we know that these were the workshops that all of the students had. We'll ask the students about those workshops, and then we'll list them in the plan as things that occurred. So it's just not as, it's easier in that way, excuse me, than it would be for USAID. And then sometimes check-ins that we do is just an internal monitoring piece that is just best practice. So before you get to the end of a program, what can participants tell you about what's working, so that you don't finish the program and have everyone say, it was terrible. So it just really depends on the effort that you would put into that.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I will say, that Quinn, do you want to put a plug in for how you use logic models? Quinn is very pro logic model.
I absolutely love logic models, but I use them for all kinds of planning. Pretty much anytime I need to think about, I'm trying to get certain outcomes and how to get there. So, but I'm sure they're much simpler than what is used out of the evaluation.
I would actually say simple is better if you are doing a visual for a solicitation. If you complement it with a narrative that's very specific, or another evaluation table that's very specific, but to give someone a quick picture of the reason you're doing this is to get to this, I think is so valuable. And I didn't say it in this, but I say it a lot. The evaluation plan, if you think about where it comes in the proposals, it often is one of the final pieces. So think of your evaluation plan as a way to summarize for the reviewers everything that they talked about in the proposal. So it might be duplicative, but that's where a logic model is like, oh yeah, that's right. They're going to have this experience, and the reason they're doing it is so that they have this. And it just sort of reminds the reviewers, after reading 15 pages or 25 pages, why you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad you like logic models, Quinn. That's great.
Any other reflections on the attendees? Hang us a whole bunch of questions. Would it be possible for you to share the links or resources you reference, for example, ones related to USAID guides? I don't know. Quinn's done a lot of it, USAID. I've done a lot of USAID. They're not horribly complicated, but they just take practice learning how to speak the language, is my impression. What's yours?
Just filling out a lot of boxes. And you feel like you're duplicating things. I think that's for me. Like, I feel like I keep duplicating. Honestly, there was a podcast. USAID does podcasts. And there are a couple that I would highly, like, if you just search USAID, there's one from like 10 years ago that is so incredible that I would recommend everyone listening to if you're interested in doing a USAID proposal. And it talks about sort of their philosophy and the way that they think about evaluation. One of the pieces that is a little bit newer is that this continuous learning piece, right? Like, they want you to be able to show that if you're doing something with all their money in a different country, that if things are going sideways, you find out about that right away. So that's where the monitoring for USAID projects becomes really important, because you're not checking in once a month, or you need to have something in place that you're checking in on a regular basis. Because the minute someone disengages is the minute that the project is not salvageable. Well, maybe not the first time, second, third time for sure. So that's where the monitoring gets really tricky. USAID has a lot of guides. I would recommend you go onto USAID's website and look at monitoring and evaluation, because I could pick what makes sense to me. But I think like in Excel spreadsheets, and you might think in narratives. So that website has a lot of information. I'm not opposed to giving you things. I think it's just if you go there, USAID monitoring and evaluation, you'll come up with quite a few things. And then definitely if you're a podcast listener, put in USAID and listen to some of their podcasts, because they explain it really nicely and give really great examples.
I would also say that you can ask people for examples, and that's sometimes you're not going to have the same activities for sure, but it at least illustrates where you're in. This is true for any evaluation. If you just even ask for an evaluation plan, you can see kind of that the depth changes based on your funding, but the pattern remains the same.
Yeah, you might also, if you're thinking about USAID, is to reach out to the ASU International Development Office, where they do a lot of these, and they can certainly provide some guidance.
And USAID in particular, it looks like we have a few who are interested in that. They do specific training. Lots of people do specific training in USAID writing. It's a very different vernacular. So I actually personally did training about 10 years ago and found it very helpful. But and Quinn's just done a million of them, right? So you can either look at the proposals and kind of learn how to speak in that contract program delivery speak, or you can take a training and kind of figure out that, or anything. Okay, well, yeah. Oh, so for any resource for evaluation in general, Google.
Yeah, and I see, a question in here about evaluation resources. There is American Evaluation Association. And they are, that's going to be a broad range, but there are some amazing other very specific groups. And I feel like I put a resource list together. I'll look for it. Sorry, I had a cold and I thought I was totally healthy until I talked for 45 minutes. But there are resources, for example, informal STEM, if you're collecting data, they have entire groups that have put together resources for that. So I can definitely look at some of the information that I have, but I would say find your topic area. Health does a lot in evaluation, and like if you're interested, like computer science evaluation. Sometimes you'll get evaluation like that doesn't have anything, because as soon as I said that, I'm thinking like UX evaluation. So you might need to mess with some of the keywords, but there are a lot of organizations now that have websites where they have open source assessments or blogs about collecting data and what that might look like. I'm going to save that.
Any other questions? Thank you for Juliana for putting in the information there. If anyone on the line wants a consultation to read a solicitation, and our office, research development at asu.edu, would be happy to be a frontline question resolver for you. And then if we can't solve it, Wendy lives down the hall, so we could actually pinch in it in the end, pitch it to her as well. So open invitation. Yes. Okay. Sure. Cool. Okay. Right. Well, I'll stop the recording, and well, I'll thank you on the recording. Thank you, Wendy, for your presentation.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone coming. I appreciate it.
Great. And then the next PDW is working with the ASU Foundation, if you're interested in attending that. All of these PDWs are available on funding.asu.edu/videos. So if you missed one in the series, go back and look at it. And if you have any recommendations for what you want to see, please send that to me too. I'm going to pause, and then you can answer this last one.
Okay.